Hello lovely people! This week is very exciting because I'm doing a tag video and I'm doing the philosophy tag, which was created by Miriam from Between Lines in Life, and she very kindly tagged me in it, and it is a super interesting tag, so I'm very excited about this.
Sophie Vlogs.
I haven't read that much philosophy. I have dipped my toe into some waters, so most of my actual answers are probably not philosophy based. But if nothing else, Miriam's video has given me a very good to-read list, so I will link to that in the description below, and I highly recommend checking her out. She's great. Diving into it, I will also apologise for... I was going to say if, I'm going to say when I mispronounce people's names in this. I'm sorry, philosophers of the world. So, question 1. Thales, I'm going to say Thales, is considered the first known philosopher. Which text introduced you to philosophy, or which text would you like to read to get you into philosophy? So, the book that actually introduced me to philosophy was Sophie's World by Justine Gardner, which my mum gave me to read. I think I was 14. I just have a really vivid memory of when I read it, because I was on a week of work experience. At my school, everyone had to do a week of work experience when they were in about year 9, I think. And I did my work experience at a library, and it was great. And every lunch break, I would read a bit more of Sophie's World. And Sophie's World just takes you, it introduces you to philosophy by starting like way back when and bringing you up to like contemporary times. I remember really enjoying it. I remember finding it less enjoyable when we got to like the Victorian era. I don't know why. Maybe that just wasn't my jam. So it's something that I should probably reread soon because I don't have the best memory of it, but I feel like if you're looking for an introduction to philosophy, that might be quite a good place to start, because the whole point of it is to teach you about different philosophers. I have read some philosophical texts. Where I would like to go next myself is I would really like to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That's been on my to-read list for ages, and I've heard such good things that I really want to get around to that at some point vaguely soon. Question 2 is, Karl Marx is a political philosopher turning the world upside down with the Communist Manifesto. Which political event or event in history would you like to read more about in fiction? All of them. I cannot read it. I just want to read all the history. Part of my job, I write children's magazines. One magazine, which I won't state the brand, but it's like a history-based brand for children, which means I get to like unleash all of my historical nerdery when I write it, which is super great. Particularly at the moment, I'm really interested in Weimar era Berlin. I just think that in between time where post World War One and this freeness for LGBT people, but then like obviously the Nazi regime happened and everything went to shit. So I read a non-fiction book on Weimar era Berlin recently, which I found really interesting, so I think a fiction book I'd quite like to find. If anyone has any recommendations, please let me know. On a non-fiction note, there's some history which I really want to read. There's a Ida B. Wells biography that I've heard really good things about that I want to get my hands on, and I also have an Eleanor of Aquitaine like history biography book thing that I also really want to get around to reading soon. So I just want to read all of the things about all of the times. Yes. Question number 3. Jean-Jacques Rousseau highly influenced the Enlightenment, a period which introduced critical thinking to the common people. Which book or author forced you to think more critically? I've chosen maybe a weird choice. What I mean is, I've chosen Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier because when I first read Rebecca, I read it at a surface level, and it's like, oh, here's a romance between these two characters. Can these plucky people make it, or will they be destroyed by the memory of his first wife? And I was very much like rooting for the protagonist and that sort of thing. Then I had a module where we studied Rebecca, and then my seminar leader completely turned the book around by making me realise that actually, can I trust a thing the narrator is saying? Why do we think Maxim's a nice guy? He's shady as fuck. And it was that way of, I was reading the exact same text, and suddenly there was this whole second reading whereby everything I'd taken for granted in the first reading was called into question, and it was just like this real moment where I became aware of the fact that I should go into things critically. I had the same thing earlier when I was doing my A-levels, when we read The Collector by John Fowles, where it's all about this guy who wins the lottery and uses the money to get out his basement and then abducts a woman and keeps her in his basement. It is creepy as fuck. It's a objectively very well written book, but like the story it tells you is just like, huh, that exact noise. And again, it alternates between his point of view, and then it changes to the point of view of the woman he's abducted, and then it goes back to his point of view. And people in my class at one point said, like, someone was like, I feel really bad saying this, but when it was her narration, actually I found her really annoying, and I found myself sympathizing with him. And it's that way in which you have to become aware of the fact that you're being manipulated as a reader into trying to make you empathize with someone who, by all intents and purposes, is an awful human being. And just all of this sort of thing. So, like, those are my two main answers for that. Question number 4. Voltaire once said, I do not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. What is a popular book everyone seems to love, but you didn't? I came up with 2 things off the top of my head. The Girl on the Train, was it by Paula Hawkins? Is that right? I don't remember. I didn't hate The Girl on the Train, but everyone acted like it was mind-blowing, and it was just fine when I read it. It was fine. I kept waiting for it to be amazing, and then it wasn't, so I think maybe I psyched myself up about that too much. My other one is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which, again, loads of people really loved. And again, I didn't hate it. I just had some issues with it, especially the romance plot in it, and I found weird, and I didn't get that. Those are just like the 2 I could immediately think of, which everyone else seems to really love, and I was just like, not really into this. Question 5. Hannah Arendt. I'm so sorry if I'm saying her name wrong. Deemed controversial even by her friends, Hannah did not shy away from telling people what she thought was true. Name a book that will leave readers uncomfortable but tells an important story. I struggled with this one because I can think of a lot of books which I think tell important stories, but I don't know if they leave you uncomfortable. What I have ended up going with is Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, which is a play set in the trenches in World War One. And I just think it does a really good job of showing you what life in the trenches was like. And I know most people, like, I don't know, it might just be a UK thing, but I feel like in the UK, like, when you do history at school, you learn about the world wars, and, like, it's one of, like, the big topics you learn about. But I just found reading Journey's End, and also poetry of Wilfred Owen, both very hard at times, because I just felt like they really managed to portray to you what life in the trenches and what life as a soldier in World War One was like. When I did my A-levels, we did a whole year on World War One literature, and by the end of the year, I have a really vivid memory of a moment in class reading Dulce est decorum est, and just not being able to really get through it because, like, we'd spent this whole year focusing on this topic, and just some of his poems and this play I found so deeply sad that I was just really drove home to me, like, the horror. So yeah, on to a cheerier subject. Number 6. You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. A wonderful quote from Nietzsche out of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I'm sorry, I'm so stumbling over my words today. Which book do you go back to for its beautiful writing? I'm gonna be predictable. Fegel's translation of the Iliad. It's just, Fegel's is my favourite translation so far because I cannot read ancient Greek. I am eternally trying to teach myself too many languages and I'm not getting anywhere with any of them, so I haven't even started on that yet. But as a result, I really like reading poetry translations of the Iliad because I find they make me think that I'm having a closer experience to what the reality would have been. Because what I like about the Iliad is not just the story, but the way the story is told, and the act of speaking it. And so I just keep coming back. Question 7. Jean-Paul Sartre raised the question, what is literature, in one of his books? What is good literature for you? What a question! Miriam, you're really making me, like, go really introspective and attempt to, like, I don't know, make sense of my interpretation of the world. I guess my answer to this is really, I don't know. I watched Sunset Boulevard yesterday. It's one of my favourite films. I think it's great. And there's a moment in it. The main character is a struggling Hollywood writer in the 50s, and he just wants to get paid. And so he's trying to submit this pitch to this Hollywood guy, and midway through, this reader comes in, and she's just like, and the Hollywood guy asks her, like, oh, what do you think of it? And she was like, it's rubbish. And then the guy stood right there. And then they have this whole debate about, like, she's very much of the opinion, I think films should say something. And I feel like that's as specific as I can get with, like, good literature. I feel like good literature should say something. I feel like good literature, not just like, oh, I really liked this book, it was a good read, but like literature with like a capital L. I feel like it should, when I feel like I've read a good piece of literature, it's something that I feel like has said something to me and that has made me have to stop and think and consider myself and consider the world around me, and maybe slightly alters my how I interpret things now and how I go forward. I don't know. So good literature somehow does all of these things and is enjoyable. Yes. Question number 8. Albert Camus. Which book did you have to keep pushing through because you really wanted to understand its meaning? This is one of the first questions where I'm giving you an actual philosophy answer. I read Works of Love by Kierkegaard, and I found it a real struggle, mainly because I felt like he's talking about love and about the concept of love and that sort of thing, and I felt like he didn't just like say his things, he like went around it. It took a very long time, I felt, for us to get places, but I kept at it because I really wanted to find out what he was saying, but it was a struggle. I still don't feel like I got everything out of it he was trying to put into it. I just feel like I had a disconnect, but I really tried hard. Final question, question number 9 is, which 3 philosophers would you love to sit down and have a chat with? I have gone for 3 lady philosophers. I've gone for Hypatia, Hildegard of Bingen, and Mary Wollstonecraft, because they are each from completely different time periods, but I feel like they would have so much to say. I just think they were women who were being really, really cool in times when maybe women were quite constricted in what they could do. So that's my dream dinner party philosophy edition. Yes. That is it. My camera is dying, so I'm gonna have to end it here with no more waffling. That's everything. I hope you have a lovely week. I will see you next week for a video that I hopefully don't have to rush.